A grieving teenager's life takes a dark turn when his mother accepts a homeless yet mysterious stranger into their home at a party, and intoxicated, Daan throws up in the toilet, prompting his older brother Robbie to assist him. Witnessing this moment, a partygoer mocks Robbie for treating his sibling like a child. Enraged, the teenager retaliates by pushing the man's head into the urinal. Following the incident, he takes cash from the bully's wallet and urges him to buy them a drink as the rude partygoer leaves arrives to hand more drinks to his friends. Unfortunately, after Daan consumes it, he throws up again and requests to be taken home while leading the intoxicated teenager to the car. Wes and Robbie encountered their friend Jonas, who thinks they're leaving early. However, Dan advises him to stay, mentioning that the duo will come back after dropping him off at home. However, while on the road, Robbie challenges W to exceed the speed limit. Tragically, they collide with a barrier, sending the vehicle plunging into the river. Soon the car submerges, leaving only Daan and West as survivors. 2 years after Robbie's passing, the traumatized Daan cares for his grieving mom, Nina, who struggles with daily tasks such as bathing, doing laundry, and eating. They reside in their luxurious house, where surveillance cameras are installed in each corner during dinner. While Daan cleans up, he mentions that he changed his mind about going to a graduation party. His mom reassures him not to worry about her, urging him to have some fun. However, he insists on staying home. Suddenly, the teenager looks outside and sees Wes. However, instead of letting his old friend in, he chose was to ignore him. The next morning, Daan and Nina head to a supermarket. After getting out of the car, a stranger named Radja suddenly starts cleaning their vehicle. Despite the teenager's advice to stop, he promises that the car will be cleaned once they return. Assuming the person needs money, Nina hands him some cash, encouraging him to buy whatever he wants. Gratefully, the stranger thanks her. Later, inside the supermarket, Daan runs into his dad's friend Luck, a cop who asks if they'll be having a barbecue. The teenager confirms this, revealing that it's for his dad, who'll be coming home soon. After grocery shopping, Nina and her son head to the parking lot, surprised to see their now clean car ready to leave. Nina reverses slightly, only to realize that they've hit Radja, who's still not finished with his cleaning as a nurse. The concerned woman decides to take the wounded stranger home to treat his injury, while Radja eats later. Down, stares at him, sensing something strange. Noticing this, the guest apologizes for his eating behavior, stating that he's never had a hot meal in his life. Suddenly, Nina enters the room, handing over the disinfectant. Medical plasters the visitor, then praises the food, but the woman reveals that it was her son who cooked it while his mom and the visitor discussed job opportunities in the kitchen. Daan walks in to wash his hands. However, when he turns on the faucet, it unexpectedly leaks, splashing water onto his face without delay. Radja steps in to fix it, and while he does so, Nina instructs Daan to move the photos away from the sink as the woman wipes Robbie's photo. Radja notices her sad expression, prompting her to share what happened to her late son. Nina then shows a video taken by her husband when Robbie was still alive. They were joyfully spending time together as a family in the pool. Upon learning this, Radja shares that his mom died when he was 5. So he understands Nina's grief. He mentions that it'll take time to heal, which the woman appreciates. That night, Dan signs up for a free fight, using it as an outlet to release his grief wearing a mask. He sneaks into a restricted area to engage in a brawl with another matched opponent, whom he ultimately defeats on his way home. The teenager spots Radja with a couple of dogs and other men, piquing his curiosity about the stranger's background. He observes the man heading to a meat truck and then taking some food to share with the dogs arriving home. Daan peers through the air vent, witnessing his crying mom and Robbie's bed. He then enters the room to comfort her. However, the woman can fight that when Radja was there earlier, she thought as though the three of them were together again. Nina reveals her decision to allow the homeless stranger to stay in their house since they have an empty room. Daan immediately becomes suspicious and reminds his mom that they know nothing about the person in response. She considers hiring Radja as their handyman, recognizing his potential from earlier. However, Daan remains unconvinced and advises his mom to rest. When the teenager awakens the next day, he's surprised to see Radja doing repairs in the yard. He immediately feels uncomfortable, leading him to contact his dad, who believes Nina shouldn't make decisions without him. Arriving home, Philippe confronts his wife for hiring a handy person, but she justifies her decision, pointing out that her husband is rarely in the house anyway. Suddenly their conversation interrupted when Radja appears behind them, the man that talks to Radio in the living room, explaining that Nina was hasty with her decision. He allows the guest to stay just for one night and pays him for the day's work. That night, Daan drinks milk from the fridge and notices that Radja is not on the couch as he walks further. The teenager discovers the guest urinating in the coil pod, which leaves him. Even more perplexed about his behavior the next morning, Daan goes rock climbing with his friend Jonas. Suddenly, Philip arrives, informing him that Radja found Nina unconscious in the bath, boomed due to carbon monoxide poisoning. Upon learning this, the teenager and his dad quickly rush to the hospital, where they learned that Nina will be discharged the next day. There, Daan looked suspiciously at Radja, believing he has something to do with his mom's situation while his dad gets coffee. The teenager raises his concern, mentioning that the water heater was working well in the previous day when done. Aspects that Radja may have tampered with it. Philippe clarifies that the water heater had been left unattended for 2 years. The team remains firm in his suspicion, but Philippe counters that the handyman saved Nina's life, emphasizing that he shouldn't be thrown out onto the street later. While alone with Radja in the car, Daan confronts him, asking what he wants from his family. In response, the helper explains that Nina wanted him to stay and he had no choice. The teenager asked him why he didn't refuse his mom's offer. However, their conversations interrupted when Philippe gets into the vehicle. On their way home, Daan asked his dad about his flying schedule. He mentions that his flight is delayed, but his luggage and suitcases have already been checked in. Arriving home, Nina and her son clear out Robbie's room for Radja, who's happy because he never had a room before seeing the box with Robbie's things. Radja suggests handing them over to someone else. He knows who could use them. However, Daan declines, explaining that they're his late brother's favorite items. That night, the suspicious teenager peers through the air vent to investigate their strange guest, whom he discovers likes to sleep beneath the bed. The next morning, Daan secretly goes through Radja's belongings. However, Philippe suddenly catches him in the act. To ease his son's worries, the managers and that the man has no police record. Philippe also tells the teenager that Rudy's mom passed due to an overdose and the police found him hiding under the bed. Later that day, Daan participates in another FRE fight, but this time he loses to his opponent. At the same time, Nina continues to get along with a handyman whom she asks to fill up the pool. When Daan arrives home, Radja invites him to swim. Unaware that he fears the water when the traumatized teenager rejects his offer, the handyman teases him for being a coward. Realizing that her son is triggered, Nina intervenes, calling out, "Help her for his rude behavior." Later during dinner, Nina excuses herself to get the salad, leaving her son, husband, and Radja behind. Suddenly, they hear a loud sound and the shock woman returns, informing them that Wes is in the garage. Philippe and Daan rush to confront the teenager, who insists on speaking to Nina. However, the older man advises him to move on and leave them alone. Returning inside, Philippe intervenes when he sees Radja comforting his wife. He then assures her that Wes is gone and that he'll change the gate code so he can't enter anymore the next morn. Daan observes Radja as he repairs the grass cutter. Later, when Philip uses it, it suddenly malfunctions, wounding his eye. The teenager immediately blames the handyman, suspecting that he tampered with it. However, his dad asserts that the helper has nothing to do with the accident. With growing suspicion, Daan tracks down Rudy's orphanage to learn more about his true background. Aside from discovering that the handyman has never adopted, the teenager finds out that their handyman has been involved in thefts, robberies, and illicit substance use immediately after he returns home to report it to his parent. However, it turns out that Nina and Neil Radja's true background all along, but didn't tell them. The handyman apologizes, saying that if he'd known she didn't reveal it, he would have told them himself. Despite this, Philippe asked him to move out soon, promising to cover his rent for a few months. Later that day, Daan, Felipe, and Radja are appearing some lights at a nearby water park when someone calls Philip. The handyman checks it for him and informs him that it's someone named Justine. Upon hearing this, the teenager questions why his dad knows his best friend's mother and why she's and calling him. However, Philip assumes that maybe Justine will ask him something about Nina. Hearing this, Daan becomes suspicious because Jonas's mom could have contacted his mother directly. Instead, that night, Dana attends a party at Jonah's house and looked suspiciously at Justine. Suddenly, he noticed his radio is also there and Nina and says he attended. while later searching for a bathroom. The teenager stumbles upon Radja and Justine's bedroom, accusing him of theft. The handyman clarifies that there's more to the situation as Radja leaves than discovers Philippe baggage, realizing that his dad has a secret relationship with his mom's friend. Fuming, he storms out to confront Jonas, who had been aware but kept him in the dark. Upon arriving home, the teenager angrily speaks with his dad, who admits to his involvement with Justine. His father confesses that he succumbed to temptation because of the tough years they had after Robbie's loss the following morning. Jonas visits Daan to apologize, but the teenager rejects his apology and punches him instead. Later, when Nina asks her son about the reason behind the fight, Philip steps in, admitting that it's because of him and his involvement with Justine. Consequently, a tearful Nina kicks her husband out and Daan watches as his father leaves. Later, the devastated teenager sits by the poolside and notices his brother's necklace submerged in the water, prompting him to retrieve it the next day. Suddenly, Nina arrives with liquor to celebrate Radja's acceptance to stay with him permanently. When she invites him to drink with them, the disappointed Daan refuses and devises a vengeful plan to get rid of the handyman. After signing up for a free fight, the teenager uses a water gun to awake the handyman. He then invites him to go for a run, but lures him to a restricted area before they climb the closed gate. He asks him to wear a mask inside. Radja finds himself being beaten up by another masked man, mistaking him for his opponent. Witnessing the handyman's plea for mercy, the teenager leaves him there and returns home, feeling remorseful for his actions the following morning. Daan finds his mother attending to Rudy's wounds, eavesdropping on their conversation. He learns that the handyman had a girlfriend named Daan when he was 14, who happened to be a 50-year-old coordinator at the orphanage. The age gap shocks Nina but Radja and says it wasn't a big deal since he was in love back then. Suddenly the doorbell rings and she leaves him for a while to open the door for luck. When Daan enters the room, Radja threatens to report the incident, implying that he knows the teenager is involved. However, during Luck's interrogation, the handyman lies, sharing that Daan was at home when a lunatic attacked him. While this relieves Daan, he wonders as to why Radja didn't reveal the truth in the supermarket. Later, Nina gazes at herself in a makeup booth. Her and Radja looks at her flirtatiously. However, their moments interrupted when she sees Wes behind her quickly. Dante takes his old friend to the parking lot to talk privately, while the handyman comforts the startled woman. Soon after, Radja follows them outside and attacks W, prompting him to drive off in shock. Dean looks at the handyman, confused by his harmful behavior. As his intrigue grows, Daan continues to spy on Radja later, catching him engaging in a self-gratifying act while wearing the shorts Nina gave him. Suddenly, the handyman looks at the air vent, aware that the teenager is watching him. Later that day, Radja invites Nina and Daan to the lake he used to visit when he was at the orphanage. Once they arrive, Nina brings up the handyman's ex but Radja denies any contact, claiming he doesn't know what happened to his old girlfriend. Radja then proposes a boat trip. Initially, Daan hesitates, wanting to stay behind due to his fear of the water. However, he later changes his mind and decides to join them. Later during the boat ride, the teenager feels uneasy while watching the flirtatious Radja teach his mom how to no. Triggered, Daan rises to stop him. However, the defensive handyman pushes him out of the boat as the teenager drowns. He remembers the night of the accident. Soon, Radja saves his life, but Nina punches him for causing trouble to his son. That night, Daan spots Radja wearing his mask and running outside. Intrigued, he follows the handyman, only to discover him entering. Once his house there, the teenager searches for him, prepared to confront him with a rock. Suddenly, Daan hears heavy breathing coming from the bedroom, only to find that the window's open and Claudia has escaped. Looking at the bed, he notices that Justine is deeply sleeping. The next morning, Luck follows up with Radja about the person who attacked him, hoping to gather some clues. He suspects that it might be the same person who attacked Justine while she was sleeping. Consequently, she is in a coma due to a fractured skull. Learning that the incident occurred the previous night, Daan realizes that Rod has set him up, causing him to feel nauseous and rush to the bathroom to throw up. Later, Nina confronts his son. Not the mask, but the teenager explains that he was lured into a trap. Suspecting his involvement in Justine's head injury, Nina questions him further, but Daan defends himself, stating that he uses the mask to participate in free fights. The teenager then accuses Radja of setting him up, revealing that the handyman was also at Justine's house that night. However, the true perpetrator fabricates a story, claiming that he followed Daan into the house because he was worried about him. Radja then shows Nina his evidence, a video of his son inside Justine's house. She's shocked, but the teenager asserts that he didn't do anything wrong. Nevertheless, she insists that Daan should be thankful because Radja looked out for him. Frustrated with his mom for siding with Radja, Daan visits the hospital to check on Justina's condition, realizing how terrible her state is. Afterward, the teenager heads to the abandoned building to calm himself down. After climbing the gate, the teenagers, surprised to find Luke, who confronts him if he hurt Justine. However, he denies the accusation, asserting his innocence. Returning, Film Daan catches Nina and Radja, putting Robbie's things into a truck. When he confronts them, the handyman explains that his mother wants to move on. That night, the teenager witnesses the handyman kissing Nina on the lips before heading to bed, making him more furious. Later, while scrolling through some news, Daan fears he might end up in the headlines, prompting him to steal Rudy's phone the next morning. Destroy the evidence, however. When Radja notices that his phone is missing, he accuses Nina of taking it. Aware that her son is in the same room, he inappropriately touches her despite her denial of the accusation. Witnessing this, Daan stops him and reveals that he took the phone. Upon retrieving the device, Radja informs him that he has more copies of the evidence. Later that day, a silently enraged Daan plans to terminate Radja's life by suffocating him with a pillow while he sleeps. However, as he's about to do so, he notices that he has a tad of his old girlfriend's name, sparking the idea to track her down instead. However, his investigation leads into a factory where he meets Diane's husband, who confirms that his wife has been involved with Radja in a moment of weakness. However, when Diane was removed from the foster home, the orphan began to stalk her and call her daily. Because of this, she decided to see Radja for one last time to end things with him. However, the factory worker explains that the police came to his house a day after informing him that Diane had been found lifeless in the lake. During the interrogation, Radja claimed that Diane dived and hit a stone, and the cops believed him, since there were no other witnesses. Immediately after learning the information, Daan starts to worry for his mom's life, prompting him to call her. When Nina doesn't answer, the teenager rushes home only to find Radja taking advantage of her in the backyard. Daan then stabs the handyman in the back, causing him to fall into the pool and drown after the. Nina stays in the basement, looking traumatized. Soon, W arrives to help Daan dispose of Radja's body on the road. The teenager throws the handyman's phone out of the window, finally getting rid of the video of him and Justine's house. Soon they reach the woods to bury the lifeless Radja there that morning. A sobbing and depressive Daan returns home, realizing the gravity of what he has done. Nina then hugs him and later assists him in bathing. At that moment, Philippe arrives to report that Justine has woken up and she recognizes Radja as her attacker. When the cops arrived for interrogation, Nina lies, stating that she and her son haven't seen Radja since the previous night. 3 weeks later, Nina and Daan watch TV, discovering that the search for Radja is still ongoing. Nina turns off the TV and invites her son to spend time with her in the pool before going for a swim. Daan brings an empty bottle to the basement where he notices that the surveillance storage is already full. Curious, he inserts the CD into his laptop to watch the footage on the day of Radja's demise. In the video, the teenager discovers that Nina indeed has a secret relationship with Radja. She asks him to leave, but engages in a romantic activity with him for one last time. Realizing this, Nina wasn't being taken advantage of all along because she wanted it in the first place. Frustrated with this revelation, Nun destroys the CD. Following this, he joins his mom in the pool area, diving into the water and never emerging. Subscribe to watch more videos like this, turn on notifications, and leave a like to help the channel out. Thank you for watching.